What are your thoughts about gender-based violence around young people?
Well, I think it's a huge issue and is something that's changed over the years. I think with the development of like social media and the internet, I think that's very different from when I was a young person, which was quite a long time ago now, sadly. We didn't have the internet and we didn't have social media, and I think one of the worrying things is the obviously availability of pornography, and the fact the statistics show that a lot of boys and young men use pornography in levels that are quite scary. And what does that mean around the image and respect or lack of respect that they'll have for girls and women? And all of that is a bit different from when I was young, and I think we need to understand better the impact that has on the attitudes, actually not just of boys and young men, but of girls and young women, about how they think about themselves and what they're expected to be like and act like. And I think all of that is a real worry, and should be a real worry for all of us in society, and certainly something that the Scottish Government is concerned about and takes very seriously indeed.
How can young people be educated on consent, and what age do you think this should start?
Well, I think we need to start with age appropriate information and education right the way through, and part of that of course with very young children is about keeping themselves safe and beginning to talk about respecting others and the views of other people. So from a young age I think those basic values are important. But as children get older, I think towards the end of primary and the beginning of secondary, being able to understand about keeping them, what that means about keeping themselves safe, and the right to say no, and for both boys and girls to understand what consent means and what no means, and to respect one another. I think there is a lot of work to be done with boys, that boys need to understand and respect what girls not just say but don't say, and the whole issue of what consent means, and that you don't actually have to say no to have refused consent, and that boys need to understand that, and so do girls need to understand that. So there needs to be communication, there needs to be respect, and I think we need to talk about it more so that everybody is clear about what we mean. And the backdrop of course is society and what people see on the television and what people read in the media, and all of those influences on young people are quite profound. We need to equip young people with confidence so that they have the confidence and self-esteem to actually respect themselves, and to not be forced and feel that they're forced into doing things that actually they don't want to do. Peer pressure is a very, very strong thing. It always has been, and I think the best thing we can do, and speaking as a mum of a 12-year-old, this is very pertinent and personal to me as well, is to give young girls and young boys the confidence around making their own decisions and not being forced into doing things that they don't feel comfortable with.
Do you think teenagers are influenced by sexualization in the media?
Well, without a doubt, and I guess that's always been the case, but I think it's more difficult now, because we're not just talking about the media as in television or newspapers, and we could have there's always been a long debate and campaign against things like Page 3, for example, which is a very explicit sexualisation of women and very young women. But it's the more subtle stuff that you see on television and the cinemas, but also on the internet and social media. I mean, sex is used to sell products all the time. It's just there all the time, everywhere, and even things that you just wouldn't associate, that it's used as a tool, and that leaves, I think, boys and girls with a view of what the role of women in society is. So it's sometimes explicit, but it's also sometimes very subtle, and it's there everywhere, and it's a challenge, not just for us here in Scotland. It's across the whole of the world, and particularly in the where there's access to social media and the internet. That is another layer that is very, very pervasive.
How do you feel about how LGBT people are represented in the media?
Well, I'm heading towards 50 now. Doesn't seem like it, but I've seen over my lifetime big changes. So when I think back to when I was growing up, there was no visibility really given to people from the LGBT community, and in fact where there was, it was negative. It was negative images, negative portrayal, almost like a kind of very stereotyping of what the LGBT community were, who they were. I think there's been a big change there, and there are now positive role models in films and television, in sport, in the don't get me wrong, there are still stereotypes, and there are still real challenges, and there are still too many hate crimes and so on and so forth. But survey after survey shows that social attitudes have changed. Support for equal marriage, for example, where the vast majority of the population supported equal marriage. If that had been proposed and those surveys had taken place 20 years ago, I don't think that would have been the case. So I think there has been a real shift in attitudes. We're not there yet. There's still a long way to go before there's true equality in all walks of life. But I think as a society, the position of the LGBT community has improved, and there are, I think societal attitudes have improved, but there's still a journey to go.
What is in place to prevent children and young people being exposed to pornography?
Well, there's obviously there's the law, and there are safeguards around internet use and all the rest of it, but those are only as far as they go with parental controls and all the rest of it. But we know that those are very, very limited tools, and that young people are still very easily accessing pornography. I think the best thing we can do is to equip young people themselves with the ability to not want to access pornography, and also to see pornography for what it is, and that is really the exploitation of girls and women, and actually in many cases boys as well. So we need to make sure that young people understand what pornography is about, how damaging it is, and to try to get to a position where young people themselves don't want to access pornography, and that they see it for what it is. I think that's where we have to focus our attention. In the Scottish Government, we have the Equally Safe strategy, which is about trying to tackle gender-based violence against girls and women, and a lot of programmes there around information, education, like zero tolerance campaigns, and to try and get that message across that to see gender-based violence for what it is, that it's not just about rape and serious sexual assault. It is also about pornography and the sexualisation of girls and women, that is part of the work that needs to be done to change attitudes. It's going to be a long haul. It's not going to happen overnight, but we need to start very much with young people.
Do you think there is enough support for victims of gender violence?
Well, I think it's better than it was. Certainly the Scottish Government has provided an increase in funding over the last period of time, and that is good. And the First Minister announced a further £20 million back in March to support organisations that are providing support to girls and women. So whether that's Rape Crisis or Women's Aid, but also some of the campaigning organisations that are trying to change some of those attitudes, the Zero Tolerance campaign and others, is all about trying to make sure that yes, we provide support to women and girls who have been affected by sexual violence, but also that we try to tackle some of those underlying attitudes that lead to sexual violence. And that is about work with young people and through schools, through community organisations, and through by parents as well, trying to make sure that parents and their behaviours and what they're doing and saying in the home, that they think about the impact that they're having on their kids as well, because that can be one of the biggest influencers of young people's behaviour is parental behaviour and what they see and hear in the home. So there's a lot of work to be done there as well.
What can Scotland do to help prevent against harmful traditional practices in Scotland and in other countries?
Well, we've taken a lot of action both on legislation around forced marriage and things like female genital mutilation, but as well as legislation, what we've done is to look at education and working with community-based organisations to change attitudes and behaviours, and also to make sure that people are aware of the legal consequences of supporting such practices. And that two-pronged approach is really important in tackling both of those issues and making sure that they have no place here in Scotland.
Do you feel Scotland as a whole has a problem with sexist attitudes?
Well, like every other country we do, of course. We're not immune. We're like every other country. Sexism it's there. It is absolutely visible in so many ways. However, what I would say is that during my lifetime, again, we've seen some progress. We've seen progress in the role models of women where they are in society. So we've got a female First Minister, so the top job in Scotland is held by a woman, and a woman who wants to use her office to make improvements in the lives of girls and women more generally. So whether it's on equal pay, whether it's around tackling violence, whether it's around gender equality and having more women in positions of authority in public life or in the boardrooms of companies, all of that begins to break down those attitudes of where women's place is. A women's place should be everywhere. There should be no barriers. And the more we have that women visible in all of these places in the media as well, if we can get more women into positions of authority within the media, we might get a big change in the way women are portrayed in the media. And so we need women in all of these walks of life, and I think the more that we achieve that, the more progress we'll make towards eradicating sexist attitudes. And I think also, we have a lot to do and a long way to go, but some of the behaviours that would have been acceptable towards women 20 years ago, now I'm not saying they're not there, but they're not as perhaps explicit in what is viewed to be a woman's place in society. Now, I'm not saying those attitudes are not held, but people are a little bit more guarded about what they say, and it is now accepted that women should be able to be in every walk of life. They should be able to be at in the top job in whatever organisation. But getting women to those jobs, there's still barriers there. There are still subtleties around that stop women getting into positions, and those are the things we need to tackle.
Thank you very much for listening to our questions and answering them.
Well, thanks very much for your very good and probing questions and the opportunity to give my views.
Thank you.